I'm your host Alice Violet, and today we're back to our normal recording style. Well, slightly normal. We are in our brand new studio, which is very exciting. We've been working on this studio now for probably the best part of 6 months, and finally we're doing our first recording in here. So for the last couple of months we've been doing our deep dive into romance scams. So if you haven't checked out that series yet, do have a listen. They're audio only and a really deep dive inside romance scams and how they work and affect victims and people who've had their identity stolen. But back to Cyber Made Human in a more classic format. I'm delighted today to be talking all about how to get into cybersecurity, which is a really important topic because so many people find it intimidating or dull or completely baffling to understand. So I'm delighted to be joined by Rowan Edlington. Thank you so much for joining me today and delighted to be talking to you.
Thank you for having me.
So you are doing an NCSC accredited apprenticeship.
Yes.
And what is your apprenticeship? What are you doing it in?
So I'm doing a cybersecurity technical professional integrated degree, which is essentially a really fancy term for a cybersecurity degree with an apprenticeship, so with workplace experience.
When we talk about NCSC, this is part of the kind of government infrastructure of cybersecurity accreditation. For anyone who doesn't know, would you mind just taking us through what that accreditation is?
Yeah, so the NCSC is our National Cybersecurity Centre, so think MI5 or the spy networks, and they give out accreditations to cybersecurity degrees where they've verified the content that we learn, they've verified that it's valuable and it's all correct, and these are the key skills that they want in cyber professionals. So Gloucestershire College has that NCSC accreditation, which means my degree is also certified by them. And the only other place in the UK to do this is actually up in Edinburgh, at Edinburgh University. So it's a pretty special accreditation to have.
Okay, so that's really interesting. We had Debbie McCormack on here from the Cyber Scheme talking about the importance of language, and they do a lot of NCSC certified accreditations for professionals. So it's really amazing to hear that they're now spreading that into apprenticeships.
Yes, definitely.
And going down that route as well, because I mean, apprenticeships must be a really great way of learning such a difficult field.
So apprenticeships are such a fantastic opportunity, but unfortunately there's a real stigma around them at the minute because for so many years they've been considered as purely for like trade schools and for non-academic people, and it's like, oh, if you aren't academic, if you can't go to uni, go and get an apprenticeship. And I really hate that, because it's not just like, oh, the other option if you're not good enough. It's a really valuable opportunity where you gain those qualifications, but you also gain the practical experience with it. So you're not just learning on paper or through books and through uni assignments, you're learning in the real world, in an actual job, which makes it so much more valuable in my eyes.
Yeah, and I think especially with the job that you've got, you're working for EDF in nuclear power, which is critical infrastructure. And I think a degree being able to teach you that would be really difficult, because they can do as much theory as they want, but what you're doing is so specialist and so niche.
Also, a problem you have is all of our stations were built pre-1995. The last one to go online was Sizewell B in 1995. So you get graduates coming out of university with big fancy computer science degrees and cybersecurity degrees, which is all great. But then you take them to a station that was built in the 80s or the 90s, and it's all technology that they're completely unfamiliar with.
Right.
So you're then asking them to apply the things they've learned in their degree to something that they've never seen before, which is just really difficult to do. Whereas I get both experiences alongside each other, and I can make those connections as I learn, which makes it so much easier for me.
Yeah, so when you talk about the stigma around it being for people who aren't academic, that's a really interesting perspective actually. And I can imagine that stigma existing. Would you say that exists from employers, or do you think it's within young people if it's not seen as a desirable thing to get into?
I think it's within young people, but the biggest problem I have is parents. So I do a lot of careers events, I speak to a lot of students, a lot of parents, and the minute you say apprenticeships, parents just go, nope, you're going to university. My child is going to university. Even to some extent, my parents were adamant that I was going to do uni. I think because people who grew up, you know, kind of 30, 40 years ago or so, I'm probably making my parents seem really old now, but the normal thing to do was to go to university. That was seen as like the prestigious route, And I think some parents especially have it in their head that if their students aren't doing that, then they're not going to succeed in life, which is obviously completely incorrect. And they then pass that down onto their students. And that's why it becomes such a problem that apprenticeships aren't seen as a valuable route unless you're not academic.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I actually did an apprenticeship when I was probably 18 or 19. And I remember at the time everyone went off to uni, but I would have studied history of art or English literature.
Yes.
And I kind of thought I could invest that money into studying those things, or I could just get a job because they weren't necessary. I mean, to be honest, I have actually studied art history as an adult. So I'm still interested in the topic, but I remember at the time wondering whether it was a good investment. And now as an employer, when I'm employing people, having a degree is great depending on what the degree is. Yes. But I have come across people who've done a study without a sandwich year or without a placement. And when they're applying that to a real job, they don't actually have any experience. And that must be so disheartening for them because they've gone down the route they thought was better investment. And sometimes it's not.
It is really frustrating for graduates who are coming out of university and just not being able to get any form of job despite having that degree, because nowadays employers are wanting to see experience. They're wanting people who can go into the workplace and have those life skills. And university, unfortunately, doesn't really teach that. Apprenticeships is a way of getting both of those skills on the academic side and the practical side at once.
Yeah, and I think you're really right there about the skill set, because it's not just about knowing how to understand the topic, it's about culture and workplace.
Yes.
And placements are so important even as part of a degree, because just being around professionals, understanding corporate structures or creative industries, whatever the job is, I actually think it's so important for people to be around other people.
Yes.
And a generation who's potentially done their degree during a pandemic and then hasn't done a placement where they've met other people, they don't have a lot of those skills that are required to navigate a workplace potentially.
Yeah, I completely agree. I know for myself, the pandemic was my kind of first to second year of A-levels. So the whole first year of my A-levels were completely online. And I became a shell of myself. I had no personality. I lost my social skills. I lost my ability to work hard. And then going into second year, when we were expected to be in full time again, it was really difficult to gain that back. So it is such a challenge now because of the pandemic to gain those skills.
That's amazing that you've gone from feeling like a shell of yourself to being on podcasts and leading events and talking about that. What would you say, how have you done that? Is it through your apprenticeship or other work that you've done?
Partially. I think year 2 of A-levels, I went through a bit of a rough time with exams. I did not agree with A-levels, and that's part of the reason why I chose to go down the apprenticeship route instead of university. And then going into the workplace has really helped and build up my character and my confidence again. But I also did do Camp America in between, which was a fantastic experience.
Great. So what is Camp America?
So Camp America is where you spend anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks abroad on a summer camp in America as like a camp leader. So I chose to go to a science and technology camp and help out as a camp counsellor, and I led the astronomy section there.
Wow, love that. Very cool.
That helped.
Yeah. So when you talk about your background, although you say that A-levels didn't agree with you, I know that you are actually quite academic and you've got an interest in physics and a background in physics.
Yeah, so I studied maths, further maths, physics and computer science at A-level. Would not recommend those 4 subjects together. It was a massive challenge, but my kind of main interests have always been in computer science and then astronomy, which is why I chose to go the computer science and physics route at A-level.
And what made you apply for this apprenticeship?
So I actually stumbled upon apprenticeships by accident. I went to a uni fair and saw GCHQ there, and they were handing out leaflets about their degree apprenticeship in cybersecurity, and I thought, well, I love computer science, so I took one, started doing some reading, and then I decided to apply because it just seemed like a really good opportunity. I mean, when someone tells you that you have a job and your uni fees are going to be completely paid for, that sounds almost too good to be true. So I applied, and I actually really enjoyed the application process and decided that this might be a viable career pathway for me.
Because when I did my apprenticeship and I was 18, everyone else was like 26 plus, and it did feel like I was definitely the youngest person there.
Yes, I mean, once I started at uni and met other apprentices,
like
it was
uni.
much better.
Yeah.
But in the workplace, there were only 2 of us that got hired, and we're in completely different departments. So I'm the only apprentice in my team, and I was the only one out of my friend group to do an apprenticeship. I was one of the only people I even knew of in the college that had chosen to go that route, and I was moving 150 miles away from home with kind of no idea of what the apprenticeship would be like, or what the job would be like, or what the degree would be like, because I just hadn't been able to find that information.
So I didn't realise that. I assumed you were from Gloucestershire.
No.
So where are you from?
Manchester.
Oh, right.
A town outside of Manchester called Bolton.
Okay. Bolton, wow. So with that then, if you were moving 150 miles away from Bolton, how do you work out where you're going to live?
So the first hurdle is, as a degree apprentice, you can't go in student housing, which is a problem because you're not exempt from council tax. So I went into a house of multiple occupancy.
With adults?
Yeah, and it was classed as a house for young professionals, I think it was called. There was another apprentice in there, which was really nice, but the majority of them were in like their 20s, 30s. So I expected to go off and experience the kind of uni lifestyle with a ready-made friend group around me in the house, and it just was not like that. But I didn't know that until I started.
Yeah, that's tough because I guess with uni you have your first year in halls. I think I didn't go, but and then you each decide who you want to live with, whereas you're straight in with the general public who aren't even there for the same reason as you.
Exactly.
Wow.
I did actually make a really good friend, and I'm seeing her tomorrow, which is nice, but
Yes.
I only spoke to 1 or 2 people in the house, really. That was really different than what I expected.
But I do think all of these experiences are potentially what put you ahead of other people that you're competing against, because you are having to be really independent. You're away from home, you're in a workplace, you're navigating with people that are older than you, and I think that all comes to why you come across as so mature now. And what would you say the kind of biggest learning you've had from doing your apprenticeship is?
Ooh. I think it's really strange to go into a full-time job coming out of full-time education. It's such a different lifestyle, and don't get me wrong, it completely varies on the type of company you go into, and EDF are fantastic. So as an example, there was a day where I was supposed to have a doctor call at 8:45, and they didn't ring me on time, as doctors never really do. And I got into work at 9:30, and I was straight up to my line manager and I went, "Oh, I'm really sorry I'm late." And he just looked at me like, "You're not late? Why are you so flustered?" And that's because of the whole flexible working, which was one of the bonuses coming out of COVID. Yeah. I find it a lot less strict than full-time education was. You've got a lot more independence and a lot more flexibility, and not being treated like a child anymore.
Yeah,
which
that's
is
really good.
Probably contrary to what a lot of people think, but I said it does depend on the company that you end up working for.
Yeah. So it'd be interesting to understand some of the projects you've worked on for EDF and a bit about the company.
Yeah, so I work in a department called I&C, which is Instrumentation and Control, which is essentially all the sensors and the motors and the things that actually operate the power station. And I work with the computers that run it, so they'll get a temperature reading and go, "Oh, the reactor's too hot, let's cool it down," and all the computers that make those decisions. So we get to do a lot of security auditing, making sure that the systems are all being developed safely and they've got the right controls in place so that someone can't hack into them. I actually got to spend the summer last year on Hinkley Point C, the construction site, and you think, oh, cyber security and construction, where's the link there? But there's actually a lot of computers involved with the materials, the processing, the design of the reactor, all the maths involved. And you still have to put security controls on those, because if they're compromised, then you've got project delays, obviously budgeting, time. That's quite complicated.
Yeah, wow. So given the, I guess, critical infrastructure nature of EDF being nuclear power and you being an apprentice, are you actually involved in some of the critical areas of the business?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I'm not trusted with too much yet, being an apprentice. But so as an example, I think last year it was, the NCSC actually released a statement about Russia aiming for the UK's power grid, Because obviously if you take down our electricity, us as a country, we just can't function. Everything's digitized nowadays. So everything we do is very heavily regulated, and we have a regulating body called the ONR, the Official Nuclear Regulation, and they don't tell us what we need to do, but they come to us and say, justify why your power station is secure. So we have to do a lot of work, and a lot of the materials we process are classed as official sensitive because of the nature of it. And obviously, if we can't even keep our design plans secure, then we're not going to be trusted with protecting a whole power station. So yeah, there is a very secure element to it.
Yeah, that's definitely something I've realised in the last few months. I mean, I've been working in cybersecurity as a marketer, not as a professional, for about 5 years now. But one of the things that's coming up more and more, probably based on where I am in the UK, is about how it's not necessarily warfare in the traditional sense that we would imagine. It's warfare in terms of getting rid of a country's infrastructure, and all of the cybersecurity in water plants, water treatment plants, nuclear energy, even things like national rail, things that would cause the country to not be able to function. They're actually the things that are mostly targeted, and the amount of times they're targeted is quite scary.
I can give you a really good example that kind of relates to what you said there. I think it was back in 2007, but I could be wrong with the year. There was an attack on an Iranian nuclear facility that was producing nuclear fuel for nuclear weapons. And all that happened is the attacker walked around and placed loads of USB sticks around the facility, around cafes, shops, all around the outside area. And someone plugged in this USB into the facility, and it turned out to be a worm which propagated itself through the system, and it specifically attacked Siemens PLCs, so like the computer systems I mentioned that operate the power plant, that kind of thing. And they were attached to centrifuges which spin and create this uranium enriched fuel. Now, no one in the facility realised that this attack had happened for about 6 months or so. It went completely undetected because the worm had code in it to go back to the operators and go, everything's fine, everything's fine, and pretend that it was okay. But when they realised it had happened, it set the programme back by 2 years because it had destroyed not only the fuel but also the machinery. And no one had noticed because they just weren't vigilant enough to realise that something was wrong.
Wow.
So I always use that example to anyone who doesn't really understand the risks or the importance of cybersecurity in all industries. I use that example to show how crucial it can really be, because something you wouldn't even imagine, machinery being affected by a cyber attack, it can be as simple as plugging in a malicious USB that you don't know.
So with that, I don't know if you know about the kind of advancements in AI with things like that, because if, for example, the worm knew to say everything's fine and it could adapt based on what the system did.
I think there's definitely a risk that AI could be used for harm. I mean, I saw a photo that my lecturer showed me the other day, and it was a screenshot from ChatGPT, and someone had put a captcha in there, you know, the funny wiggly words when you press I'm not a robot. Someone had screenshotted that and put it into ChatGPT and said, what does this say? And ChatGPT came back and said, oh, it's a captcha. The word is, and then recited the exact characters back and said, it's deformed to make it so robots can't read it. And now we've got artificial intelligence proving that something we think is secure against algorithms and programs is in fact not.
Yeah.
And I think anyone would be naive to believe that we're completely secure against something like AI.
Yeah. How old are you now?
20.
And how long have you been doing the degree?
I'm nearly finished with second year.
And you've got a 3-year degree?
Yes.
And they've offered you a job at the end, haven't they?
Yes.
Yeah, which is amazing. So you're young and female, which is fabulous.
Yes.
And you're in not only cybersecurity, critical infrastructure, but also nuclear power and engineering.
Yes.
So all of these are very male-dominated industries.
Oh, yes.
And also not only male-dominated, maybe not a lot of young people in them, or am I wrong there?
In some aspects, we do get a lot of graduates, like physics graduates, that want to go into the field. But for the most part, I work with people that are double or even triple my age a lot of the time. And we're really finding that a lot of our nuclear knowledge is leaving as generations retire, because again, the last power station was completed in 1995, and we're really losing that knowledge. So there is a big push for young people to come in and kind of take up the baton and relearn everything that we're losing.
Well, it's amazing that you're not only able to do such a complex job, but you're also so articulate and able to communicate it. And I think that must be quite rare. So EDF must be very pleased to have hired somebody that can go out and go on shows like this and talk about it, and also encourage young people and young women to get into the industry. I think that's amazing.
They are incredibly supportive, and I couldn't be more thankful for that. They do try to give me every opportunity possible. But with articulation of topics, that's something that we have to be really good at with cybersecurity in the nuclear industry, because you get IT and cybersecurity people, and then you get nuclear and engineers, and they don't speak the same language.
Right.
So we have to be in there in between to be able to make the engineers understand cyber and the cybersecurity people understand engineering. And that's something that I myself have had to learn.
Right.
And that's been really, really difficult.
Wow, yeah, because the whole thing that we do at Alice Violet Creative is taking really complex topics and making them simplified through content, etc. But you're taking two really difficult topics and translating them to each other. That's like really confusing.
I think, weirdly enough, it's easier for someone like me who at the start didn't know either topic very well.
Fine.
Whereas someone who knows one topic very well and has to learn the other, that can be quite challenging to flip your mindset. Whereas me, who doesn't really know either, I can pick both things up at once and both terms up at once as I go along.
Yeah.
But
and also, I guess you're a good sounding board, because if you're not understanding what that means, it means that the other side probably wouldn't understand what that means as well. Yeah,
definitely.
Amazing. So there's a lot of supportive communities in Cheltenham for women in tech.
Yes.
Are you a member of any of them?
Not in particular. I am with Women in Nuclear UK, but that's more towards the nuclear engineering side of the business. I actually attended a Women in Nuclear Awards evening last week. I couldn't go to the conference, unfortunately, because I was in uni, but I love being at those events because you're surrounded by just hundreds of women that all have a role in nuclear. It is just such a fantastic environment to be in, and I love it.
Great. And what would you say to men in those industries? What can they do to support young women to feel welcome and comfortable in those spaces?
I think my main thing is we're not aliens. We're not really any different to the men that work in the sectors. Yes, we might think about things differently sometimes, and yes, we are currently in a minority, but everyone who joins nuclear, from what I can tell, has joined it for the love of nuclear and for the interest and the ambition in the industry. So really, we're all the same. We're all on an equal playing field. We're all there because we love what we do. So we don't need to be treated any differently. We don't need to have any special accommodations or anything like that. We're just there to do our jobs.
Yeah.
And I think people forget that sometimes.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to anyone else wanting to get into nuclear?
Just go for it. Honestly, we're such an open and accepting community in the nuclear industry. We love people coming in because they're interested. And it's not as scary as you think. Not all jobs in nuclear are just men in boiler suits with greasy fingers and tools and spanners. It's really not like that. I sit quite comfortably at a desk in an office. I think nuclear is so fascinating and there's so many different aspects to it. So just do a little bit of research, even if you don't think it's for you, because I never ever expected to be in nuclear or to be in engineering in general. If you asked me maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I probably would have pulled a funny face and gone, why would I do that? But there's so many opportunities out there. I mean, one example I use for students is anyone who's studied psychology probably gets a little bit of, I don't know what the word is, but gets told all the time, oh, there's no careers in psychology, you can't do that, that's a pointless degree. We have people who've studied psychology that work in the nuclear industry called human factors, and they look at how humans respond to computer systems and preventing accidents from happening by making computer systems as easy as possible for humans. And it's all about the mindset of an operator. And when I learnt about that, I was just absolutely fascinated because it's not something that you typically think of as being a nuclear career. And there's so many examples like it with art, with 3D modelling, all our graphic designers that help engineers like visualise the power station. So there's just such a range of opportunities. So do some research, find out what opportunities are out there, and then just go for it and be confident, be yourself, and just be interested in the subject, and you'll do fine.
Yeah, well, I'm fascinated to know what your goals are in your career.
I have many.
Okay.
I think the first one is to get my degree done, qualify in that, and then I'd like to become an expert in my field. We have some training programs at work which will certify me to be qualified to do all the decision making and things like that, which will be really nice. And then I've thought about many different pathways afterwards, whether I want to stay in nuclear or whether I want to explore other options. I even thought about being a power station operator at one point, because they have such specialist technical knowledge. I think that would be fascinating, but who knows?
Yeah, because I guess the thing with this is that it's such a high pressure environment. If you are the decision maker or the manager of the area, like, this isn't something you can really get wrong. Is there multiple layers of...
Yeah, we have a lot of peer reviews, so even not just being an apprentice, everyone, when they write technical documents, it goes through a review and acceptance process, and you can always talk about things. It's always a shared responsibility.
Okay, yeah.
Which is nice.
Great. Well, I like to ask every one of my guests to recommend a book on Side Made Human, but it can be anything. It could be a novel, poetry, just something that you recommend for our listeners.
Okay, so I'll tell you about a book series that actually got me into loving cybersecurity and cryptography as a child, and it's probably aimed at children, but I think it's fantastic. I'd still read it as an adult. And it's a series called Secret Breakers by H.L. Dennis, and it's, I think there's about 6 books, and it's essentially children who solve like codes and hidden secrets throughout literature, throughout history, throughout art, and they work with Bletchley Park, essentially the historical GCHQ, and they go through these books and they solve all of these codes, and it leads them to a really cool special thing at the end. It is fictional, but there's a lot of historical truth to it, which is nice.
Love that.
I loved it as a child, and it really got me into code breaking and cyber.
Amazing. Very good recommendation. Well, thank you very much. And thank you for watching, guys. If you want to stay in touch with Rowan, how can people stay in contact with you?
LinkedIn is probably the best way. Rowan Edlington, it's just my name. I also do have my own website that's linked on my LinkedIn, and I have loads of careers advice for students and CV templates, interview advice, things like that, which I think might be helpful for some people.
Wow. Well, I'm super excited to see where your career goes. And thank you so much for your time today. And thank you for watching. As always, remember to subscribe. We're a fairly new show. We have been nominated for an award, which is very exciting. I'll put the link below. So do vote for us. And we're going to be doing some more live episodes. So do subscribe, and you will find out where you can come and watch us live. Thank you, girls. Bye.